When a woman lives without sex, something extraordinary begins to happen deep within her energetic core. Desire, once expressed outwardly, begins to coil inward, spiraling through her body like quiet lightning seeking a new direction. This energy does not disappear, it transforms. Every unexpressed impulse, every withheld craving, every restrained urge becomes raw potential. This is the process of transmutation, where physical energy evolves into emotional, creative, and spiritual force. It is not suppression, it is redirection. It is the same principle that fuels saints, artists, thinkers, and visionaries, those who learn that the most powerful form of passion is the kind that burns inwardly, not outwardly. At first, she might feel restless, even unsettled. The body has its memory, its hunger, its pulse that once found release in touch and connection. But with time, something changes. The energy that used to rush toward another person begins to circulate through her system, awakening parts of her that have long slept. Her mind becomes sharper, her creativity expands, her intuition grows stronger. The fire that once lived below her waist now fuels her voice, her ideas, her sense of mission. She starts to feel alive in a new way, not because of someone else's presence, but because she has discovered the secret engine within herself. This transformation is subtle but undeniable. She becomes more magnetic without even trying. People sense something different about her, a calm confidence, a quiet radiance that doesn't need validation. It's as if her energy field has become cleaner, brighter, more self-contained. There is a particular glow that surrounds a woman who owns her desire but is not owned by it. She walks differently. She speaks differently. She no longer seeks attention because she has become her own source of warmth. She no longer chases excitement because she now understands that the most powerful current flows within. In this space, her sensitivity heightens. Colors appear richer, silence feels deeper, her inner voice grows louder. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel like fullness. She learns to sit in her own company and realize it's not loneliness, it's liberation. The same energy that could have been spent in physical pursuit now becomes the force that builds her dreams, writes her art, shapes her future. Her focus deepens because her energy is no longer scattered. She begins to feel that her very presence carries weight. This process doesn't come from denial or moral restraint. It comes from choice, from awareness. She is not avoiding intimacy, she is mastering energy. She is learning that her sensuality is not just physical, it is spiritual, creative, and deeply personal. When she channels it, she doesn't lose passion, she refines it. She doesn't extinguish desire, she turns it into devotion to her craft, her purpose, her growth. Her drive becomes more disciplined, her emotions more stable. The very same force that once created attachment now creates art, insight, and peace. As her inner energy refines, her nervous system starts to regulate. The emotional chaos that came from dependency or heartbreak begins to dissolve. Her confidence becomes rooted in her ability to generate her own light. There's a serenity in her now, an unspoken knowing that she doesn't need to prove her worth through physical validation. She feels powerful, not because she resists, but because she has learned to channel. She recognizes that her energy is sacred currency, and she chooses where to spend it. The absence of sex becomes the presence of awareness. The woman who lives without sex for a time begins to realize how deeply energy rules her life. She becomes aware of where her attention goes because energy follows attention. She stops wasting her mental power on fantasies that drain her. She stops measuring herself through desirability. Every time she redirects her energy inward, she feeds her spirit instead of her ego. She begins to experience what true sovereignty feels like. It is not coldness, it is clarity. It is not suppression, it is transformation. Her body begins to heal from the inside. The hormones that once fluctuated with emotional dependence start to balance. Her sleep improves. Her mind becomes quieter. She begins to experience pleasure in different ways, in creation, in movement, in meditation, in silence. She learns that pleasure is not something that must be taken from another. It is something that can be cultivated from within. This realization changes everything. She begins to live in harmony with herself, aligned, energized, aware. As this new energy integrates, it touches every part of her life. She starts to notice that her decisions come from intuition, not impulse. Her relationships become healthier because they are chosen from fullness, not lack. Her goals become clearer because her focus is no longer blurred by emotional chaos. She becomes magnetic not because she is available, but because she is whole. People sense her depth, but can't quite name it. That depth is energy, refined, contained, and radiating from within. There is a kind of woman who no longer needs to be pursued, because she has already met herself. Her energy, once scattered in desire, now moves like light through her veins, steady, conscious, luminous. She becomes a living example of what it means to rise above instinct and turn raw human hunger into divine expression. When a woman lives without sex, she begins to meet herself in ways she never has before. The noise quiets, the distractions fade, and what remains is a deep, raw mirror reflecting her emotional truth. Without the pull of physical intimacy, she starts to see what she actually feels, not what she has been taught to feel. The absence of sexual connection strips away the illusions that often come with attachment. The fantasies, the projections, the constant need to be desired, and leaves her face to face with her real emotions. It is in this space that emotional clarity begins to bloom. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The silence can be unnerving, the stillness confronting. She realizes how often she has used relationships, attention, or validation to escape herself. When the distractions fall away, she begins to notice her own patterns. The way she attaches, the way she overgives, the way she confuses intensity for intimacy. She starts to see where her heart has been wounded and how much of her emotional energy has been spent trying to prove her worth through connection. This awareness can sting, but is also liberating. It is the beginning of truth. In this new space, emotions rise to the surface: loneliness, longing, sadness, anger, all the feelings she had once covered with affection or closeness. But instead of running from them, she learns to observe them. She learns to sit with her heart's storms without drowning in them. Emotional clarity doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it with open eyes. The woman who lives without sex begins to understand that her emotions are not her enemies. They are her teachers. Every ache, every tear, every moment of emptiness becomes an opportunity to understand herself more deeply. She starts to distinguish between love and attachment. She realizes how often she has called it love when it was really a fear of being alone. She recognizes how often she has mistaken comfort for connection or attraction for safety. The absence of sexual intimacy gives her the distance to see these patterns clearly. She no longer confuses attention with affection or validation with love. She begins to see the subtle ways she gave her energy away just to feel chosen. Now she chooses herself. This emotional clarity begins to change the way she relates to others. She becomes more discerning, less reactive. Her boundaries sharpen. She no longer says yes when her heart feels no. She no longer entertains what feels misaligned just to fill the silence. Her conversations become more honest, her relationships more intentional. She starts to listen to her intuition instead of her loneliness. She understands that peace feels very different from excitement, and for the first time, she chooses peace. When a woman withdraws from sexual relationships, she often discovers how much emotional labor she used to carry. She feels the weight of the roles she's played: the caretaker, the pleaser, the one who gives until she's empty. With clarity, she begins to set those roles down. She realizes she doesn't have to earn love by being useful, beautiful, or available. She begins to unlearn the belief that she must give her body to receive affection. This unlearning is powerful. It rewires her sense of worth from the outside in. Her emotional clarity also deepens her connection to her intuition. With her energy no longer tangled in other people's emotions, she starts to hear her own voice again. The whispers that used to be drowned out by noise become louder, clearer, wiser. She can sense when something is right for her or when it isn't. She starts to make decisions from her inner knowing rather than external pressure. This alignment gives her a sense of calm strength. She no longer seeks reassurance from others because she trusts herself. Without the emotional highs and lows that often accompany sexual relationships, she experiences a kind of equilibrium. Her moods stabilize. She no longer rides the roller coaster of anticipation and disappointment. Instead, she lives in a rhythm that feels grounded and self-contained. The drama fades, replaced by clarity and calm. She can finally see her life clearly. What serves her, what drains her, what deserves her energy, and what does not. This clarity spills into every area of her life. She begins to speak with authenticity, to express her needs without guilt, to take responsibility for her feelings without blaming others. Her communication becomes cleaner, her presence more stable. She doesn't hide behind charm or seduction, she stands in truth. There is power in that simplicity. She starts to value emotional honesty over performance, connection over chemistry, substance over spark. And as she continues on this path, she notices that her emotions are no longer chaotic or overwhelming. They are data, signals guiding her toward alignment. She doesn't suppress them, she translates them. She understands that every emotion has a message, and by listening, she becomes fluent in her own emotional language. This fluency gives her freedom. It allows her to experience life with depth, but without losing herself in it. She feels more open, more conscious, more alive, not because she is being fulfilled by someone else, but because she finally understands what she truly needs, what she truly feels, and who she truly is. When a woman lives without sex, she begins to reclaim something that society often tries to take from her power. The kind of power that does not depend on beauty, approval, or desire. It's the power that comes from self-possession, from knowing that her worth does not hinge on anyone's gaze or touch. When the noise of constant validation fades, she starts to experience what it means to belong wholly to herself. This is not arrogance or withdrawal, it is sovereignty. It is the quiet, grounded realization that she is her own home, her own center, her own source of fulfillment. At first, the absence of intimacy may feel like a void, a space where something is missing. But as time passes, that same space becomes sacred. It becomes the ground on which she rebuilds her identity without the influence of others. She begins to recognize how much of her power she once gave away, often unconsciously. Through seeking validation, compromising her boundaries, or silencing her truth to maintain harmony. Without the distraction of romance or physical attachment, she starts to see where she has been conditioned to shrink, to please, to perform. She starts to pull her energy back from all the places it has been scattered. The process is gradual, but every day she becomes more centered in herself. Her attention, once turned outward, begins to turn inward. She becomes the observer of her own life, the witness of her own emotions. Instead of reacting to others, she begins to respond to herself. This internal shift changes everything. The power she once sought through being desired becomes the power she now feels simply by being aware. Her sense of self no longer depends on what anyone thinks of her. She learns that the most magnetic energy is the energy that needs nothing. There's a particular radiance that comes from a woman who knows she belongs to herself. It's in her posture, her tone, her eyes. It's not something she tries to project, it's something she embodies. She no longer needs to prove anything. She doesn't chase. She doesn't compete, she doesn't explain. She simply exists with quiet certainty. People can sense it. They feel her steadiness, her presence, her restraint. She is rooted. The energy that once reached outward in longing now rises upward in strength. Living without sexual involvement gives her space to feel her own power again, unfiltered and undiluted. It allows her to remember that her body, her energy, and her time are sacred currencies. She begins to spend them with discernment. She stops giving away her emotional resources to anyone who hasn't earned the right to receive them. She becomes protective of her peace, aware that every interaction either feeds or drains her. Her boundaries grow stronger, not as walls, but as expressions of self-respect. She no longer fears saying no, because she understands that her no is just as powerful as her yes. As she deepens into this self-possession, she notices that her decisions change. She no longer acts from impulse or insecurity. Her choices come from clarity. The fear of being alone fades because she no longer equates solitude with lack. She has found fullness within herself. She starts to enjoy her own company, not as a substitute for connection, but as a testament to her wholeness. She realizes she can nurture herself emotionally, mentally, and spiritually without relying on external affirmation. This realization is a quiet revolution. It shifts the way she moves through the world. The energy that used to scatter in pursuit of attention now consolidates within her. It strengthens her focus, amplifies her creativity, and fuels her goals. She becomes more intentional with her time, her friendships, and her environment. She no longer entertains situations that drain her. She becomes the guardian of her energy, aware that everything she allows into her life either aligns with her purpose or distracts from it. This self-governance brings a deep sense of freedom. She is no longer controlled by desire, expectation, or fear. She acts from choice, not compulsion. In her presence, there's a stillness that commands respect. She doesn't need to demand it. It happens naturally. Her silence carries weight because it comes from confidence, not uncertainty. People notice that she no longer reacts easily. She has learned to pause, to choose her words, to hold her ground. Her emotions no longer control her. She controls her emotions. This kind of power is rare. It's the kind that comes from discipline, awareness, and self-trust. Without realizing it, she begins to inspire others. Her friends notice that she no longer entertains chaos, that she radiates a sense of control that doesn't feel forced. Her presence reminds others that it's possible to be soft and powerful at the same time, nurturing yet unshakable. She doesn't need to dominate to lead. She leads by alignment. Her calmness becomes contagious. She is no longer living from reaction but from intention, no longer seeking permission but giving herself full authority to exist as she is. This self-possession becomes her foundation. It anchors her when life gets noisy. It shields her from manipulation because she can sense the difference between love and dependency, between attention and respect. Her power is no longer about how many people want her. It's about how deeply she respects herself. The woman who once searched for herself in someone else's eyes now finds everything she needs within her own reflection. When a woman lives without sex, something profound happens to her understanding of love. What she once thought was love begins to dissolve, layer by layer, until all that remains is something purer, quieter, and deeper. Without the physical exchange, without the emotional intoxication that often blurs perception, she begins to see love for what it truly is, not an exchange of bodies, not a transaction of attention, but a vibration that lives within her. In the silence of her own presence, she begins to redefine what love means. At first, the absence feels like deprivation. She may equate touch with affection, passion with connection, and intimacy with love. But as time passes, she realizes how often those were substitutes for something else. So much of what she once called love was dependency, habit, chemistry, or the temporary relief of being seen. She begins to understand that love built on need always ends in exhaustion, while love rooted in awareness brings peace. In solitude, she starts to separate attachment from affection, fantasy from reality, and possession from partnership. The illusions start to fall away. This awakening often begins in small, unexpected ways. She might feel love in the warmth of the sun on her skin, in a quiet moment of laughter with a friend, in the stillness of the night when she feels connected to something greater than herself. These moments show her that love has always been around her. It just wasn't limited to one form. She begins to realize that love is not confined to romance. It's the energy that flows through everything living, the pulse of life itself. When she tunes into that vibration, she starts to live from it instead of chasing it. Her definition of love shifts from "I need you" to "I honor you." She learns that love isn't about possession or performance, it's about presence. It's not about how someone makes her feel, but about how deeply she can remain open in their presence without losing herself. She learns to love without clinging, to give without fear, to receive without guilt. This doesn't make her cold, it makes her whole. She begins to see love as freedom, not as control, as expansion, not as confinement. Living without sex teaches her to listen to her own heart more closely. She starts to notice that love isn't something she gets, it's something she is. When she stops chasing it externally, she discovers that it flows naturally from within her when she is aligned with her truth. Her compassion deepens, her empathy expands. She begins to love people not for what they give her, but for who they are. And more importantly, she starts to love herself with the same tenderness she used to reserve for others. This self-love is not about indulgence or ego. It is about respect. It's about honoring her energy, her emotions, her time, her body. She starts to treat herself as someone worthy of care and gentleness. The love she once searched for becomes the love she gives herself daily. In the choices she makes, the boundaries she keeps, the way she speaks to herself in silence. This shift changes everything because the love that comes from within can't be taken away. It doesn't depend on another's attention, touch, or validation. It becomes her steady ground. As her heart clears, so do her relationships. She no longer confuses excitement with connection. She stops accepting chaos as proof of passion. She sees how much of what she once called falling in love was actually falling into unconscious patterns. Now she seeks peace over drama, truth over illusion, mutual growth over comfort. She starts to attract people who meet her where she stands, people who are whole within themselves. She learns that love isn't about two halves completing each other, but two wholes sharing energy and balance. This redefinition also changes how she gives love. It's no longer about sacrifice or martyrdom. She doesn't give to be needed. She gives because she overflows. She doesn't love to feel important. She loves because it feels natural. Her love becomes less conditional, less performative, and more grounded in truth. She can hold space for others without losing herself in their storms. She can walk away without bitterness when love no longer aligns with peace. Love, in this new understanding, becomes sacred, not because it is rare, but because it is conscious. It's the kind of love that doesn't demand, doesn't fix, doesn't fear. It allows, it observes, it forgives, it grows. She begins to sense that real love isn't something to fall into, it's something to rise through. It's a continuous act of awareness, a practice of seeing divinity in everything, even in herself. As she continues on this path, her energy softens, but her spirit strengthens. She carries love like a quiet flame, not for anyone else to take, but to illuminate her own way. The love she embodies becomes a reflection of her healing, her patience, her clarity. She no longer looks for love in faces, words, or promises. She feels it in the breath of life itself. What once depended on another now becomes a constant state of being, an inner rhythm that keeps her whole, grounded, and deeply alive.